On the AIS, he was marked as dangerous, and I could clearly see he was dangerous. Our transit wasn't changing. He would have basically just run us over. There is, I think, one golden rule that we should all know as cruisers. It should be the first rule that we learn. A boat that we actually saw was run over. Wow, what a sunrise we had this morning, eh? That was pretty spectacular. So today we are going to head back up the west coast of Lombok. We just want to at least get to Sumbawa, which is the next island along. But we're going to take our time. We're going to take a few days to get there, obviously. So first thing we've got to do is to exit out of this tiny, really tight little channel. So we've got to be very careful because the sun is very low in the sky and we can't see much in the water. So slowly, slowly. Why is this guy so close to us, you may ask? Because the asshole that he is completely ignored all my communication on 1.6. He was the overtaking vessel coming out of the port just over there, and on the AIS he was marked as dangerous, and I could clearly see he was dangerous. Our transit wasn't changing. He would have basically just run us over, and didn't deviate, didn't slow down, didn't respond on 1.6. You know, it's people like that that give the good skippers out there a bad name. What an absolute
Right. Calm down.
I'm calm.
Tell everybody why that skipper had contravened the COLREGs, what it all means.
Okay, the COLREGs, the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea. This is an internationally recognised set of rules of the road.
Okay, so colloquially known by all us sailors as the COLREGs.
The COLREGs. Yes, and if you don't know what the COLREGs are, but you've been on a boat, you may well have heard vessels on a channel pass port to port, for example, where that's stipulated in the COLREGs.
And the lights that we use on the boats, the nav lights, so we've got green and red, you put them on certain sides of the boat so that the person coming towards you knows what's going on.
We're not going to go through every single one. We're just going to just give you a little sort of brief overview of what they are, and then maybe just use that particular example of the guy overtaking as to how I think he contravened the COLREGs, so we can just learn something from it.
Yeah, and anyone who's got a boat probably knows all of this, or certainly should know all of this, but it's probably worth doing a refresher as well, just to make sure that you have got it all correct. Now with the COLREGs, do we talk about right of way or not? Is that wrong?
Yes, this is one of the first mistakes people make, is people talk about right of way, and according to the COLREGs there is no such thing as right of way. No vessel has the right of way, but instead they do use terms stand on and give way. So you're either the stand on vessel or the give way vessel. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that as small boat skippers, compared to some of these large container ships out there, quite often, even if we are the stand-on vessel, there will be situations in which you have to swallow your pride and become the give-way vessel.
Yeah, because if you don't swallow that pride, you could be the under-the-water vessel. The other mistake people make is thinking that these are just guidelines, and in fact, I always thought that, but in fact they're not just guidelines, they are rules of the sea. So you might find yourself in court, and if you haven't followed those COLREGs, you could be liable for stuff. And your insurance company, if you look at the small print, will probably tell you that you should be abiding by all the laws and the rules and the guidelines and regulations for what you're doing.
You should at least have a copy on board, and it should be something that you refer to frequently just to remind yourselves of these. So the onus is not on us to teach you, you've got to teach yourself.
And if you've done any courses, like in the UK we do RYA courses from basic crew right up to yacht master and so forth, you will cover this off in the courses. I just did the basic competent crew and we learnt about lights and shapes and so forth, so, and port to port and all this kind of thing. That's just the absolute bare minimum. You did yacht master, and in that I think you had a lot more detail.
Indeed. COLREGs are broken down into 6 sections. Part A, general. Part B, steering and sailing rules. Part C, light and shapes. Part D, light and sound signals. Part E, exceptions. And Part F, compliance. Now, the rules of Part B, steering and sailing rules, are further split into 3 sections depending upon the state of visibility. Section 1 covers any conditions of visibility. This really covers things like proper lookout, safe speed, avoiding collisions, crossing traffic lanes and so on. Section 2 is vessels in sight of one another. So that's really 2 vessels approaching each other, overtaking and generally avoiding collision. And then section 3 is restricted visibility, which is again safe speed, spotting targets on radar, dealing with fog and various signals, etc.
So, which section did our friendly captain contravene and what was the boat doing wrong?
Rule 13 introduces overtaking, and it states, any vessel overtaking any other should keep out of the way of the vessel being overtaken. And according to 13b, a vessel shall be deemed to be overtaken when coming up with another vessel from a direction more than 22.5 degrees abaft her beam. That is, in such a position with reference to the vessel she is overtaking, that at night she would only be able to see the stern light of that vessel, but neither of her side lights.
I understand, I think, how it all works, but can you put it into words of 1 syllable?
I'll go one better than that, and
Okay.
I'll do an overlay, because I think the overlay is going to make the most sense.
Right.
So if you imagine your boat pointing north to south, and then you take the beam of the boat, so that's a horizontal line intersecting the centre of your boat, 22.5 degrees down from that beam is the beginning of the overtaking section. Now this happens to coincide with the angle of your stern light. So if you approach a boat from behind at night, you can only see its stern light.
Yes.
And as you cross behind a boat, eventually you'll reach a point at which you'll either see his port or starboard light. That is when you've fallen outside of the overtaking zone, and that is when you've now hit 22.5 degrees towards the beam.
Yes. Okay, yeah, all good.
The thing is though, at night time it's a lot easier to work this out.
Very easy, because you just do it all by the lights. That's providing, of course, that the vessel has got the correct lights on it. In this part of the world, they don't always have the correct lights. Certainly fishing vessels will have an array, a multitude of lights, and it can be very confusing, but that's a whole other topic. What we were looking at was something that was happening during the day, so we didn't have the benefit of the lights, although we could see what was happening. So I guess one of the problems is proximity and things happening very slowly when there's an overtaking vessel.
Difficult to sort of judge distances and speeds, and as we said, at daytime to actually know, well, does he fall within that overtaking zone?
Yes. So it can appear to be happening slowly, but it can also happen very, very quickly, can't
Well,
it?
it does. It just sort of builds up very quickly.
Accelerates.
Yes,
Yeah.
This is where things like AIS and radar come in useful. If you're familiar with AIS, you'll know that we have this calculation called closest point of approach, which is your CPA. And this is a crucial thing to keep an eye on. And this is why I knew that this vessel was a danger to us, because I was keeping an eye on his CPA. This is measured in nautical miles, and it tells you how close you are to a collision were both vessels to maintain their speed and their direction.
Okay.
And I could see that CPA was dropping.
Right.
So when it's over a nautical mile, it's normally okay in my books, but when it starts dropping and it got down to about 0.4 miles, you know that, and he was still 2 miles away, you knew that this was potentially a dangerous situation.
So the other thing I do, just and I'm sure everyone else does this who has a boat, is you choose something on the deck as a little transit, and you watch that boat and you see if it's going past the transit. But if it stays in the middle of that transit, doesn't move, that means you're on a collision. That's a real, just sort of simple way of looking at it.
Yeah, and the key thing there is when you're using transits is to stay in your own position. So if you're at the helm, stay at the helm and use the same transit, because obviously that would change if you move around the boat. But but above all of this, there is, I think, one golden rule that we should all know as cruisers. It should be the first rule that we learn. Rule 5, look out, possibly the most consistently contravened. According to myseatime.com, there are 3 crucial areas of maintaining a watch: by sight and hearing, which is of course including VHF, by all available means, including things like AIS and radar. And then thirdly, an appraisal of the situation risk assessment, which means you need to be understanding the situation you're in. So you need to know the traffic zones, the depths, who are the stand-on vessels as you approach, say, a shipping lane, and so on.
So this is all well and good in theory, but how do we put it into practice when we're sailing?
Well, rule 5, keep a good lookout.
Yeah.
I think common sense prevails. And it's a case of just monitoring the situation all the time. So if you see a boat come over the horizon or appear on AIS first, it's just to constantly monitor it.
So there's always one of us on watch. One of us, usually it's the person on the wheel, is on watch while the other one's tinkering, doing whatever. And when you're on watch, you are constantly looking, as I am when I'm on watch. If I see something I'm not quite sure about, the transit may have gone or something and I can't work out where it's going, then I'll call you in and you'll take over and we'll work out together what's going on. Sometimes I help you, certainly at night when we've got fishing boats. You often ask me where's the net? Can you see we get the bins out? We have a good look around. So we are 100% of the time on watch.
It sounds really obvious, but
Yeah.
we do hear of stories of people that, they perhaps maybe they're too tired or they're distracted, and that's when the mistakes happen. So it's obviously to keep watch, but also to use all the tools available to you.
Yeah.
And of course, radar and AIS are the two really, really useful tools in these situations.
Yes.
So assessing the situation using these tools, if you decide that you think there's a potential for a collision, I don't think there is anything wrong in trying to hail on VHF 16 through to the approaching vessel.
Yeah, and even with us in circumstances, we've seen a big vessel that appears to be not on collision, but we're not sure that they've seen us. We'll hail them then, because you don't know, they may suddenly alter their course and they haven't seen you. You just want to make sure, you're a tiny wee boat in a big ocean, just make sure that they know you're there.
In an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if all sailors of small boats spent a day on a commercial vessel and vice versa? Because we've spoken to commercial skippers and they say to us, we just can't see you.
Yeah.
You think you're visible with your sails out, but more often than not, these big commercial vessels haven't seen you at all. So quite often it's incumbent upon you to make the first step, and quite often use the VHF and hail them.
Yeah.
And try a number of times. Don't give up after the first time. You don't know what's going on in their bridge. They may have their own crisis. It could be noisy.
There could be nobody on watch in some of these boats.
Yep. Maybe they just don't speak English.
You can send an emergency, can't you, to get them to pick up on VHF?
Yeah, so you can use, of course, DSC, which is digital selective calling, and that's where you punch in their MMSI number and you can have a one-to-one direct conversation with them, and it will sound an alarm on their VHF. So if that doesn't work, then you've got to start thinking about taking evasive action, I suppose.
Something like a ferry that we had in this situation is doing this passage hundreds of times, day in, day out, all the time, and they're probably not at all interested in what's going on around them for most of the time, because they just assume, certainly in an area like this where it's nearly all tiny small boats, that everyone will get out of their way, and that includes yachts like ours.
Even if they are the giveaway vessel.
Yeah.
In most of our dealings with commercial skippers, they are on the whole very responsive, and we've had great big tankers move out of our way because we were the stand-on vessel, and they're very accommodating. But there are situations, and we do come across them in this part of the world, where perhaps it's a language thing, and they do not respond at all. Even if you are the stand-on vessel, this is where I think you have to take evasive action. So obviously change course. When you change course, you need to make it very obvious. So, you need to be turning, I think, more than 90 degrees off your course. So at least they know, if they have seen you, they know that you've changed course and you're now going in a different direction, ideally away from them.
Yeah, so just a little adjustment ain't enough. You want to make it really big and obvious.
Yep.
Okay.
If it's difficult to do that, then of course you could either just back the sails, just to slow yourself down.
We've done that.
Yep. Or just put the engine in neutral if you're motoring, just to slow right down.
It hurts, but you have to do it sometimes. Safety is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's all about sailing defensively, defensively and avoiding situations sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's my biggest fear. You know, we all have different fears about sailing. My biggest fear is being run down.
And it happens.
Yeah. I could start this off by saying what an absolutely beautiful morning here in Lombok. Good to be out, good to be about. Nearly saw dolphins. Jamie did see them. Yeah, what a great start to the day. Or I could start it out by saying here we are once again motoring in Indonesia through all the crap and the filth and the plastic in the sea. Take your pick. Anyway, it is good to be on the move again. We've had quite a while down in the southwest part of Lombok, kind of getting ourselves back together, getting ourselves sorted, relaxing and enjoying some very quiet time, with de-stressing probably being the number one, and it seems to have worked. So, on our way to Madana Bay now, and then after that, what? Oh, I just saw something.
Well, as Liz enjoys the tranquil, misty setting, I'm still fuming. We see this frequently. VHF is neither monitored nor used much by these skippers, and yeah, we actually did a 360 with the sails out just to stay out of his way. Here's another example of local bad seamanship. I'm obviously not in a very good mood today. I am in a good mood, but behaviour on the waters, I've forgotten how bad it can be. But this we see all the time. The spider boat clocks us, and actually he's done the right thing. I take that back. He's turned around. He's now coming alongside us. He was racing towards our bow, which is quite often what they do. They see you and they'll race towards the front of your boat, not realising, of course, anything could happen. Much safer to go behind the boat. I think I said recently that one of the things that really depresses me around this area is the state of the waters. The other thing is bad seamanship. Fishing boats I can deal with, the little fishing boats aren't a problem, but those big commercial vessels, like the behaviour of the one we saw this morning, completely unacceptable. And the reason why I'm particularly head up about that situation is because we've just found out that a boat that we actually saw down at Marina del Rey was run over by an Indonesian flagged cargo ship at night that apparently wasn't lit. It was running dark, it had no lights on it. Fortunately, the people on the boat, there were two couples, they managed to survive unharmed, but the boat was unfortunately a write-off. I was asked, is this something you see? And I said, no, not as far as I know. I haven't seen boats not running lights at night. But actually, when I think about it, I have come across this in the past. I remember once going across the Indian Ocean, clocking a boat on AIS, making a note of its name, and next thing we know, he turned all his lights off, and I got in touch with him and asked him what he was up to, and he was quite surprised that I'd radioed through and hailed him by his boat name. Turns out he was nervous about pirates, and that's why he turned his lights off. So, the point being that these big boats can run dark at night. Not ideal, is it?